I wrote this book after living abroad for 5 years. I actually started writing it after 2 years in Rwanda in East Africa, because I realized that my truth and who I was as a woman and the choices I have intentionally made. There were women all around the world who never examined, I think, the choices they made for their lives. And to be a woman who has intentionally chosen not to have children, who doesn't see legal partnership, legal marriage as the ideal partnership, who travel the world, who sees the whole entire world as her home and wanting to explore it, who doesn't believe in the Christian construct of God, that all of those things identified who I was. And I realized that while I thought these were just sort of personal choices, no big deal, nothing to truly have to actually write about, the more I encountered, especially women in Africa. I traveled to 13 countries when I lived in Rwanda. I traveled to 13 countries on the continent, and I started to see a pattern. And that pattern seemed to be that there were many women who, although they were not miserable, they didn't live miserable lives, there was a sense that there was a box. There was a box of good Black womanhood, and anyone who deemed herself worthy to give herself permission to live outside that box was in some very direct and indirect ways made to feel that she was insane and she was crazy. And I realized that I spent a lot of my young womanhood thinking I was crazy because I didn't want all the things I was supposed to want. And so I started writing this book when I finished my 2-year contract in East Africa, and was heading to Shanghai, China, because I felt like there needed to be a documentation. And actually, I think the perfect extract to read comes from the very first page in the preface, because it puts a lot of this into context already. So I'll read maybe the first page or two, and we can go from there. I wrote this book because 20 years ago, I needed to read it. I was not aware that I needed the words within these pages, so I didn't go in search of them. There is a chance that what I have penned here has been written on numerous occasions by numerous women like me. Nevertheless, I must submit this work as documentation. Somewhere, I am certain, there is a young Black woman curled up on a couch with a man she adores. This man has offered her his sperm and his last name. She wants to be as excited about this offer as he is, but she wants to tell him she does want to marry him, but just not right now. Maybe in a few years when she feels ready. She hasn't said this to him because it doesn't feel like the truth. Somewhere I know there is a Black girl sitting on the floor of her studio apartment. She hasn't replied to the email that her soror sent urging her, girl, send me your resume. I can get you an interview for a position it takes most people years after graduation to be considered for. See, this Black girl started her research during her final semester. A year later, she has done all the calculations, thought about the obstacles and how they can be overcome. If she teaches English abroad for 3 to 6 years, she can pay off her student loans, travel to several parts of the world, and invest in a modest condo that she can sell off for a healthy profit if she chooses to return to the United States. Somewhere, there's a Black millennial who has stopped going to church because she no longer wants to pretend she's a believer. She was respectful of her parents' belief the entire time she lived under their roof. She knew better than to express doubt in their God and irritation with the men who ran his church. Now that she's an adult, there's no longer a need for pretense. Each of these Black women thinks she is strange. She questions her reasoning and silences the thoughts that could mean she is insane. This is not what she should want. This is not how she should embark on Black womanhood. She will make her choices regardless. The woman in love will not marry her good Black man, nor will she birth and raise children. The college graduate will thank her soror for looking out for her, before buying a one-way ticket to Thailand. The atheist will ignore her community's prayers for her soul as she lives her life free of a desire for salvation. But there will be this feeling they cannot shake. Something is not quite right about me. They won't understand why their decisions about their lives cause so many whispers, invite unsolicited advice, and spark concern for their futures. And this quiet chastisement by their community will cause them to question their choices. Eventually, with enough reminders that they are unicorns, they will follow orders and try to chip away at the weird horn protruding from their foreheads. It is with this book that I say to these women, sis, you are not crazy. Neither are you alone.
I feel like everybody should take a breath. Woo, sigh. Yes. You are not crazy.
You are not alone. I really do like the three examples I give of those three Black ladies are all me. I thought when I was in my early 20s that I couldn't contribute to the conversations with my girlfriends about whether or not their boyfriends were husband worthy and whether or not they would find the right man in time to get married. I thought I couldn't contribute because I was one of those people who was just waiting, you know, in the future. I knew I would not have children from the time I was a child myself, actually. So I kept waiting to want that. And at the ripe old age of 44, I still don't want either one. Although I can be talked into a good marriage, I guess. I've always wanted to travel outside of the U.S. I've wanted to live outside of the U.S. I didn't see the need to stay within a 6-block radius of my mama's house as a sign of being a good daughter. And I began questioning Christianity and the supernatural being called God somewhere in my late teens, and realized by my early to mid 20s that I didn't believe in that either. And having grown up in New Orleans in the Bible Belt South, I always felt like a freak of nature in regards to that too. So the book comes out of a need I saw to document my truth, because I've learned over the years that I am not alone, that there are whole communities that are there to embrace me, of people who look like me for each identity that I own. So I thought like maybe if when I was in my early 20s, if someone had given me this book, if I had access to what a life looks like for an adult woman who didn't take on all the things that were supposed to make her happy, and yet she is extremely happy and living a joyful life, like I would not have felt, would I have felt so alone? Would I have felt like I was really cuckoo? Because I did quite often.
Definitely. Interesting. So what are some of the questions that came up for you all, and anybody can just throw them out? And you can hit this particular passage, or if there were others that came up from any of the other chapters.
I honestly don't have any questions, but I do want to say one thing. I do actually want to say thank you, because I saw so much of myself in that book that I spent most of the time just slapping the table and saying, finally, somebody good.
I've gotten that a lot these last few weeks.
Yeah, so it was reaffirming for me in many ways, because this is a lot of the things that you talked about in the book I don't talk about, because I often feel like a unicorn, and because I don't have a lot of those support groups that you mentioned. And so they're whole conversations I opt myself out of because I don't fit into that. And so this book made me feel normal. And I think that's the first time in a long time I've actually felt normal. So I want to say thank you.
You're welcome. And you already make me feel gratified for saying those specific words, because in all of the events where I've had the Q&A and the talk, like after reading and an extract and just going through my process, there's been some version of what you said. I've never seen this story written before. I've never seen it put down in black and white as this, but you're the first person to say, I feel normal, because that's exactly what I want. Because as I said, and I mentioned throughout the book, we, in many ways, I think, probably outnumber all the Black women who keep getting written about, the ones who are sad and who have this life that it just happened to them and they can't get what they want, are ones who fit into the box and who tell us there isn't a box while telling us to get in the box. So
Yep.
yeah, when you don't fit into the box that you were told doesn't exist, while you're watching people crawl into it and they're beckoning you to come, you can really feel like you are insane. And then people will tell you it's no big deal. You're just live your life. Don't nobody care. It's no big deal. But at the same time, the structure that exists around you don't document you, don't show you. They don't make you visible, which again is another way of saying you are crazy. Like you're imagining this. And just like you, for the longest time, I didn't say anything, particularly as a woman who has chosen not to be a mother. That was one of the first essays I wrote. The S word was the first essay I wrote. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was at the PJs on Esplanade Avenue in New Orleans before I was ready to move to Shanghai. And particularly being a Black woman on the continent of Africa, who shamelessly tells people, I don't have kids, I don't want them. It's not a mistake, nothing wrong with my lady parts, I don't want to have kids. That particular no thanks to that, as a Black woman on the continent of Africa, it really felt like something I needed to say, because for years, you are silenced when you speak up as a person who has chosen not to have children. And when people are giving you shade, and again, are claiming it's not shade, or when they're spending literally your teens, your 20s, your 30s, still questioning you about what you say you want and whether or not you know what you want. And then when you occasionally push back, being told you are the crazy one, you are the one who's imagining all of this pushback, it can be a lot. And I didn't realize how much I silenced myself because of all of those identities that I felt that, but the tribe of Black folk who I love, the tribe of Black folk had written this contract for me and all of you. They didn't really consult us about the contract, if we're being real, but they wrote this contract, and because I didn't fit in the terms and I wanted to renegotiate the terms for me, they're telling me we don't care, but at the same time, yes, we do. So I'm glad that, first of all, you're welcome, and I'm glad that it made you feel normal, because that's what I wanted. I wanted someone who identified with this truth to know you are not alone, that your version of normal is pretty healthily represented. We just don't, for some reason, don't see it in pop culture or dominant culture. We don't see it at all, especially in Black culture, but it's pretty heavily represented.
Can I ask what, if you would be willing to share anything that most resonated with you?
There were too many parts to narrow down. I mean,
one thing I should say.
The S word.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact time the first time I was called selfish, but I do remember the time when I won't say cornered, but I will say ganged up on. It was my cousins and a couple of my aunts, And we're having a family barbecue, and I'm having a good time and all this other stuff. And one of my aunts pulls me off to the side and said, you're getting a little too old to be out here with no babies. That stuff's going to dry up at some point.
Lord.
And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's okay. Thank you for your concern, but
Yeah.
And then she's like, starts pointing out my cousins. Well, so-and-so got 2 kids and such and so got 2 kids. And I'm like, good for them.
They're cute. They're lovely, lovely little kids.
I've been playing with them in the park. Didn't you see me, And so then it became, everybody come over here and talk to Angela and tell her what's wrong with her because she's like not wanting to have any kids. And it was like, they're all around me. And I'm like, for real? Is this what we're doing? Is this what we're doing today? We're gonna detract from barbecue and stand around and tell me what's wrong with me because I have chosen in my life. I'm not doing any of you in home. You want to have babies? Have them. I will come to the baby showers. I will play with your kids. I will love them up, send them home spoiled. I will do all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, Angela's going to her house and doing what Angela does. And then the kicker was when they invited my grandma over.
Oh my
Lord Jesus.
Yeah.
Lord have mercy.
She didn't say anything right away, but later on she asked me, and these were her words. And I am not joking. These were her exact words. Do you even like men?
Oh yeah.
I'm like, Grandma, really?
I'm trying to make that connection. Like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Those were her exact words. I sat there for a minute, like stunned, like, Grandma, really?
Yeah.
Because I've chosen for my life not to have any. Now, my grandma had 12 kids, but back then birth control was not a thing. And you got pregnant, you had it. That's what you did. But like, I was truly stunned. I'm like, yeah, Grandma, trust. I like men.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you know that.
How do you even respond to that though? Like, and that, I hate to interrupt you. That's what has often, from the time I was a young woman, because literally, like I say in the S word, when I was in 6th grade, I knew who I was because these girls were playing this game where they talking about what they were gonna name their babies when they got older, and they looked at me and I was like, it was like being in math class. Like, I have nothing to contribute here. I have no idea what you're talking about. So, but what kills me is so I'm assuming if she asked you that you don't have a partner, you're not married, you didn't have a partner at that time, right?
At that time, I did not. No, I didn't.
So here's what kills me about that. You're calling me selfish for considering my life and my needs for a baby that will be in my body or not. Mm-hmm. And I'm supposed to consider, because your future husband, that question just always was very telling, because so I'm supposed to consider phantom men who don't even exist yet in my life. I should be thinking about them when I'm making a choice about bringing a human life into this world that I could quite literally die. Serena Williams damn near died, and she got money. So I could damn near die. So when I'm considering whether or not I'm going to use my womb to bring a life, not going by a puppy, not a new pair of shoes, but to bring a human life into this world, I am selfish for thinking about my needs only. So I got to think about my mama. I got to think about a phantom husband. Like, this dude don't even exist. He could come, he could not. But I should be thinking about that. And if he does come, again, I've been all over the world, and I'm looking for these co-parenting partnerships where the daddy is just as tired as the mama. I ain't seen it yet. I have seen involved fathers, and I have seen mothers who say my husband is involved. But in Africa, when I taught at a school where there were 50 nationalities represented, it was clear to me who was taking on the lion's share of running the home and raising the children. In China, where many of my students and their families were wealthy, it was clear to me who was taking on the lion's share of the work when it came to the running of the home and the raising of children. So my life will be the one that's impacted the most. I will have to end up sacrificing, whether I'm happy about it or not, the most. But yet I am selfish for not thinking about the phantom husband, not thinking about my mom and her desire for grandbabies. When, again, I could die. Like, it literally is my life I'm offering to have this baby. But I'm selfish for thinking about my needs and whether or not I want to when I make this decision. It truly, the older I got and the more I started to become vocal, and it really has been only in the last 5 or 6 years, the more astounding it is to me what we're saying to women when we ask them that question, and when we continue to challenge, harass, and bully. We don't call it that, but that's what it is. Bully Black women especially, who just simply say, motherhood is not my thing. That's all we said. If it's your thing, again, tell me where you register. I'll get you some nice stuff. When your baby's in the double digits, I will take them to get a man in the petty. So I have said nothing about this tradition. My mother chose motherhood. I'm glad she did. All we have said is no thanks. And when we question Black women, like what happened to you, and trust me, I've heard even more extreme versions of that. It says a lot about the expectation that, particularly if you're a woman who wears Black skin, you should want to sign up for martyrdom. You should want to be a sacrificial lamb. Every other person's voice should get a vote. Everybody should get a vote. And even decisions that affect you and only you. So it's truly profound to me and very telling, I think. And I think more problematic than the people who do those kinds of things want to admit. Like, that's extremely problematic. But I'm sure your auntie and your grandma didn't think anything of it. But they're saying a lot more than they realize when they do stuff like that.
I'm just sitting here, I'm listening. I'm married, I have kids. So
I'm sure you have wonderful kids. Congratulations.
I do, but you know what? Go already. I'm tired. I'm being real serious. Just tired. But no, but if I had this book back when I was growing up, because I had my kids young. I had my daughter at 21. And my thought process back then was, okay, I have this baby, so I got to marry this man. I literally was at my wedding that day, like, I don't want to do this, but everybody here, so that's what got to happen. That was with my first husband. I'm serious. No, I'm serious. And I'm like, we cool now. We got kids, that we raised together. But I'm like, you was a liar. You was a cheater. I knew all this, and I married you anyway. That's sad.
There's a lot of women like that.
It is. It's sad. It's truly sad.
Can I tell you, in the week since I've been back in the U.S., I joke all the time on my social media and also with my friends offline about how a lot of stuff changes in 5 years. Like, the subway still sucks, but it sucks even more. A sandwich is now $9, used to be $7. But one of the things that has been truly telling is I've had 2 girlfriends announce divorces. And I've talked to another one, and she's on her way. She's not saying the D word, but just in her conversations and the things that she keeps saying to me when we're talking about, catching up on, her family and her husband and her life. I don't know if her husband's aware, but another year or so, some people are probably going to get filed. And what's interesting is those women have been married for about 10 or 15 years. This is what I say. I don't want to disparage anyone's marriage. I personally don't see that as a construct for me. I do believe in love, and I do believe in partnership. I too enjoy the men folk, but I don't see marriage as a construct that works for me. But one of the things I can say is, again, when I look at the life of my friends' marriages, and when I look at the marriages from a very outsider's view, I'll be straight about that. You don't know what's going on in people's homes, but when I look at the marriages, again, for the families that I have worked with all over the world as a teacher, one thing I can say with absolute certainty is the life of the marriage involves the woman wrapping herself around the husband and wrapping her life around his. And I truly believe, it's odd to me that the carrot of marriage is dangled in front of single women's face a lot, But in my humble, again, outsider's view of marriage, it seems like given the life of a marriage, long term, it truly is the husband who benefits the most, because you have a whole person, a whole ass person who wraps their life around yours. I mean, when I was in Rwanda, I saw women who were, the whole family was in the country because of the woman's job. She wasn't just like, a school teacher. She was the American ambassador. She was running the embassy, essentially. So she had a visa, the husband had a spousal visa, and the kids all had, visas because of her. And then she got, money for the schools too. She was able to get her kids into the private school where I taught, that the embassy would pay for the school fees. So basically, they followed her. And even in that situation, whenever I sent emails out to both parents because something was happening at school to coordinate something, it was always the wife who was organizing, orchestrating. And I can say the number of men who I saw trailing their wife was minimal. I can count on my hands that example as being the norm. It was mostly the husband came on contract for whatever reason and the wife trailed. So the life of the marriage, even though there are many women who enjoy being married and who will make that choice again, but generally, if you are a woman who truly wants autonomy and who truly wants to build your own power, the way I see marriage working a lot, even in these modern times, there are very few men who are going to create a marriage with you where you don't have to wrap your life around theirs for the long term. Like, that's again, it's what I have observed. And when I look at why my friends are divorcing, when they talk about why they tried and now it's time to end it, underneath all of the things they're saying is basically for 20 years, they were in the shadows of not just the husband, but the whole entire family, of running and being the emotional laborer for the whole entire family in the husband. And yes, he took care of them. He had good money and he wasn't about to like leave her, but still, like, your whole life is wrapped around the man. It seems like the husband gets that more in the long term than the wife. That's just been my observation.
I can definitely agree with that.
What'd you say?
I said I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And I've never been married, which is why I don't want to disparage anyone, but it's just an observation I've made, especially again, because I wanted it to be clear again in the book that while I'm sure there is a segment of single women who truly desire marriage and who don't feel complete, and I don't judge them. That's above my pay grade. That's not my story to tell. I don't identify with them, but if you legitimately feel that way, I'm sure there is a segment who do. But I also wanted it documented that it could be a choice. It could be a definitive choice that someone has made simply because they saw the other option, they examined it, and just said it's simply not going to give me the life I want. And that you can have a version of love and partnership that still is valid and legitimate, even though it's not on the escalator to shared mortgage and 3-4 kids who you take to play dates and stuff like that. But that's valuable. But I mean, it's the century of our Lord, the 21st. There has to be more options or more room for us to negotiate and create the lives that we want. And that includes the partnerships that make more sense for us. And for us, many of us, that construct doesn't work. Men and women, I'm sure. But I think it's fed to women so much as what you're supposed to want. When a woman is kind of like, when I think about it, nah. She has to be sort of talked off a ledge, or people don't think she's serious because we're the ones who's supposed to want it so bad. But in my observation, we don't benefit from it as much in the long term as the men folk.
Statistically, it bears out to be true that actually women's earning potential goes down when they marry.
Doesn't surprise me.
Their
at
earning
all.
potential, their all around, all indicators when they marry and they have children. Men actually do better married, women do worse.
Because the women are making their lives easier and more comfortable for
Right.
them to have the power and the energy and the confidence to then go and ask for the promotion.
Well, when you're in
Yeah.
a patriarchal society, and then when you add to that for women of color, you're dealing with the intersectional oppressions on top of that, right? So that confounds the issues as well. So, but yeah, I mean, you know, full disclosure, I'm almost 52 years old, never been married, no kids, never wanted any, never wanted to be married, never wanted legal marriage. I'm a minister, right? And never, you know, I do not have I'm not a legalist when it comes to a male God. Thank God. If I had a male God, that would be a problem. He wouldn't know much about me, right? You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and I came out of the Baptist church, so I ain't supposed to be preaching, right? So,
Right.
yeah, you know, but yeah, it's for a lot of women, and that's why, you know, when I started working with Keturah, I was so drawn to her work because I knew that those voices were there. And I knew that those stories were there, but I also knew that they were in silent frustration. And so I knew they would connect with people once that they heard or read those words, right? Because sometimes people just need to read themselves.
Yeah.
And then that gives them voice, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of us need permission. That's another thing that's coming up.
Exactly.
The more I go out,
Yeah.
there are so many women who just need permission. Again, this is all around the globe. In China, I came across women who just needed permission. When I told them about my book, when I had events in Shanghai, I would talk to women, and it was always the same theme. Like, I don't even know if I want this. I don't know if I'm making this choice because I just don't want to be called single dog over Chinese New Year dinner anymore. Because that's what they call women in China who make it to 30 without a husband and a baby. Single dog or a leftover woman. So I don't even know if
You say
this
leftover woman?
Leftover woman or single dog. I literally had
single
dog, like D-O-G. I literally
leftover woman.
I literally had a woman call herself that while she called herself that while she was talking to me. She's like, I'm
and
a
she
single
called
dog.
herself that.
She called herself that.
Oh,
She referred to herself as a single dog, and she said it with such nonchalance, as if I said, oh yeah, I have dreadlocks. Like, she said, I'm a single dog. And I had to stop, and because I'd heard that was a term. I'd done a little research before I moved, and I was like, oh, so it really is just as accept, like, I've had students refer to themselves as that jokingly, like for Valentine's Day when they had the little giveaways that the kids would do at school. I had a seventh grader say, oh, Miss Kendrick, I didn't get a Valentine's Day. I'm a single dog, and just chuckle and laugh. It's deep. So, I think there are a lot of women who don't question or examine that. They take on the accoutrement of womanhood without stopping to think why it is accoutrement.
And it's violent. You know, it's the same way I think women taking on selfishness. I think that's a very violent, that's throwing a violent word at a woman saying she's selfish. And I've gotten that more often than not. When I've said I don't want children and I don't want a husband, and I've had mothers tell their sons, oh, you don't want her, honey, she's selfish. Yes, especially if she don't want kids.
Yes.
Oh, she's got to be selfish.
And again, that is what kills me about the very 18th century belief that, first of all, we have gendered nurturing.
Yes.
We have effectively gendered nurturing, where simply because I have a womb and I have breasts, I automatically am meant to nurture. Even though for years we have had in our personal experiences, in the dominant narrative, the dominant media culture, examples of women who obviously are not nurturers. They're decent people, but they're not nurturers. We have gendered nurturing so completely that the idea that an adult woman who is a minister, like the word itself means to take care of people. Like it's
and don't be a big woman.
Oh,
I'm a thickum. And I literally had a woman tell me, girl, you would be a mother and a grandmother. I could just see.
And knew nothing about you.
Was laying on your chest.
Oh. I've had people on Mother's Day say similar things to me. Don't know me from Adam. I'm walking through the store.
I could literally be a psychopath.
Like, oh, thank you. I was like, where are your kids? I don't have kids. Oh, would you make a great mother? It's like, I could be an axe murderer. You don't know me.
Girl.
Black and female and of childbearing age.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I would make a great mother. I could be an axe murderer. You
I'm
don't.
just mammy.
Exactly. You just look like.
I just look like mammy.
You look like. Because it's just crazy to me, because we've gendered nurturing, and we also have truly convinced ourselves that there is a longing for children that every woman has. And again, even in the face of many examples of women who have children who obviously did not long for these kids. What happened was they didn't have access to termination services, or they were guilted into wanting to utilize those services. And now they have babies, and they're doing the best that they can with those babies. That's the reality of it. But so like, it's interesting how you're automatically thought to be selfish because you don't want to raise children, as if that is the only way for a woman specifically to access care and to show her ability to care for another human being. And what I have found, again, at the ripe old age of 44, and starting to challenge more of these rather ridiculous notions, is when you talk to people who believe that, whether it's connected to you in motherhood, or just this idea of marriage and traditional family is what makes you selfless, what gives you comfort when you have somebody who's looking out for you. When you talk to them, what they're saying is, the people who live in my house, I'm down for. Fuck all of y'all else. Hell with all of y'all. Yeah. Because when you talk to many women who don't have children, they are often much more involved in the world outside of the people in their house.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then soon we don't have lives. We're not busy. I will put my schedule up against any mother. First of all, it's crazy to compare, right? Exactly. But if I put my schedule up against hers, the difference is I'm outside, she may be inside. We're both busy.
Exactly.
But I used to get in trouble, quote unquote, all the time in churches because the focus was on families, mothers, fathers, and children, but never singles. And if it was singles, it was about
how to get them, how to cure them of the illness of being single. Right. That's what the singles ministry is. Let's find a cure for your unmarriedness.
Because you had no identity. See, this whole thing around marriage and kids is to give women an identity. Mm-hmm. You have no identity if you have, right? So, but my identity is what I decided it is. And my place in the world is what I decided it is.
Exactly.
Period. And so that is very threatening to a lot of men and a lot of women. It makes women fearful because they have heard these messages all their lives about children and husbands.
And you know what? I find the ones who are the most spiteful about it, women, are the ones who regret their choice, who are starting to question it. Because that's another, that's another thing that's coming out of this movement of women who are child-free by choice asserting their voice. There's also an adjacent movement of women who regret motherhood and who are speaking about it. And one of the things that they say is, I don't regret my child's presence. I'm glad this child is in this world, and I will raise and take care of this child because I'm a good human being. And if I had to make this choice again, it would be a firm no for me.
Right.
And there are women out there who own that and believe that it's very difficult for them to speak up about it, because you can imagine the vitriol that they would face, especially again if you are a woman who wears black skin saying that. But I have found the friends and acquaintances, women who have been the most inexplicably annoyed with me when I've simply said I don't want the lifestyle of a parent, or I don't desire motherhood, and that's it, have been women who I think later on, like when they get some brown liquor in them,
where's the Hennessy?
They have 2 little minutes into that Henny, and y'all start talking, and they start telling you things that pretty much come down to, wish I had the courage to question this more. And I've had, again, child-free Black women straight up say to me, my cousin told me after she had some brown liquor in her that she wished she had the courage to make the choice that I made. But then when she was sober, she threw me under the bus in front of the family again. And when you gonna get that man some babies, you selfish, yada, yada, yada. But I think what I have seen, when the women who have been the most catty and the most like, you selfish, or you gonna regret it, you sure you don't want one, you broken, that's why. When you get to know them better and they're more honest with you, there are women who are at least at the most remorseful that they didn't question the narrative more. Even if they are at the most at peace with their decision, they are sort of challenging or wondering if they can stand behind their choice. That's what I've seen with women.